And we're starting in 3, 2, 1. What is up, QCM? Keep it back with you. And welcome back to the channel. So, I dropped this bomb a little earlier, and briefly touched on it. But now I want to talk about it in more of a direct thing. So, for those of you who aren't part of the ROM playing community, um, and by that I mean anybody who's not using an emulator to retrieve old games that are no longer sold or are extremely hard to get your hands on, and getting basically, for all intents and purposes, a copy of the game downloaded to play on an emulator that basically ports it to PC. Um, for the record, that's how I play the majority of the games that I record that are ones that were old console games, including the ones I own, because it's easier to record them when doing them through the emulator. So lately, both Nintendo and another company, I'm not sure which one, really blasted a site called Vim's Lair, which is where I was getting most of my ROMs from. It's not a very heavily trafficked site. It's one of those sites that, with the limited use that it gets, you can only download one thing at a time. That's the kind of bandwidth they're paying for. So it was already struggling to even stay around as is. And um, this is within the last month. And I understood Nintendo coming after them because Nintendo is Nintendo about things. But the other reason it really came into my radar, there's a couple of reasons. For one, yes, I had a list of games that I wanted to download and play through, and for the most part, I've downloaded quite a few of them. But I didn't want to, waste hard drive space for stuff that I thought, it'll be a while before I play that. And so now those things are, I gotta go find them somewhere else if I want to try to do them at all. And for some of those games, some of those are for games that are not very popular and aren't sold anymore anywhere except for a second-hand store if you get lucky enough to find one, and then good luck finding the console that runs it. And I'll go on to talk about my thoughts on Abandonware stuff in a minute, but I think it's a dang shame that one of the companies that made Xbox games of a particular kind, among them being the Call of Duty games, so it's probably either Treyarch or Activision that's partially behind it, did the same thing. It's very hard now to find a ROM of any of the early Call of Duty games. Now, if they were making a comprehensive library of all of these anytime in the next 2 years, I would be okay with that. Because that means that they will be made available again. You may have to pay for them, but I would be okay with that. But there's no sign that, well, I don't know if we'd even hear if they were doing like a Master Chief Collection for Call of Duty. But there's no sign that Nintendo's getting ready to do any major game dumps yet. I know that it had been tossed around the bush a little bit about them doing a GameCube collection, but they're only hurting themselves by taking that stuff down. Because that's how most people are getting exposure to it right now. There are a couple other sites, but out of fear that they're going to get blasted off the face of the map, I won't talk too much about them, especially in this video. I've mentioned a couple briefly before, and that's all I'm going to do for right now. The channel Discord might even be up by the time I get this video out. So I'd be more comfortable talking about it in there, um, where the conversation's a lot less likely to prick the ears of others. Um, so that's kind of been a big deal that happened very recently. Um, I guess that'll probably be, I don't know how many of these I'm down deep now, probably a month or so. So I guess for context, it's not quite the 1st of July yet when I'm recording this. So, middle of June for the timing on this context. Oh, and I was going to say, the only other reason it came up was because my sister-in-law, one of my sister-in-laws, just got her own computer, and much like Maddie, she never got to play most of those games for it. So I was doing a little comprehensive list of some ROM games for her. And we came across the fact that that was happening in the course of me downloading games. You know, like I said, you can only download one at a time when you download with them. And I, probably had somewhere around 100 different tabs open, each with a different game on it, because I would just middle click them all. So it was at that point that I started coming across that. For quite a few other consoles, there are other sources, and there's quite a few out-of-the-way consoles that I never even knew what were. Like, for instance, there's one apparently called the Wonder Swan. Didn't know what that was. I have a website that has an okay list. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of games on it, but it's like 24, 25 games. And it was kind of like basically just like a Sega. But Xbox doesn't have a extensive content on any of these sites in general anyway. So it's quite disappointing that I was going through classic Xbox games at the time, and that's when I discovered that the stuff started getting taken down. And that's when I went and I checked the bookmarked Nintendo stuff and realized that Nintendo took stuff down too. So yeah, that's kind of a thing that's been going on. So now here comes the bit where I'm going to talk about kind of my opinion on Abandonware. And for those of you who don't understand what I mean by Abandonware, it's simply software that the developers have abandoned the hardware that hosts it. And usually that they've abandoned the content itself as well. Meaning they're not planning on remaking that game, they're not planning on redistributing that game, they don't have a license to do that game anymore, and nobody can play the game because you can't buy it and you can't even find a console that works for it. It's my strong opinion that once a company decides to move beyond a console and be like, okay, well, we're not going to fix these, we're not going to sell these, and the games are moving forward without you, I feel like there should be a countdown. And not even a long one, something like 5 years. And if they don't seem to be going along with even showing any signs of purchasing more licensing for that game, or anybody does, or if it looks like they're just completely leaving behind that generation, then that content should be watched as far as copyright infringement goes, but should be available to be put up as a ROM, and call this part of the preservation project, if you will, with like kind of like the idea of the Wayback Machine. It's keeping the abandoned software alive, but because everybody knows there's these emulators that can play it, so the people who want to actually still can. So I think it's really bullshit that they're taking this shit down just because innocent people, and especially for like the groups of people who could never have afforded the game in the first place, you're not getting $60 off of those people anymore, or $120 or whatever. You're getting $5 maybe at GameStop or a thrift store, and that's if the company even sees that revenue. The revenue for them is already gone. There's no reason for them to be such a stick in the mud about it if they're not going to revive it and they just want to leave it for dead. Like, it's seriously bullshit. It's not like people are selling it. I agree with them DMCAing people who are selling it. But these people aren't selling it. They're hosting it freely out of the kindness of their hearts for other people to be able to enjoy. You know, I am very glad that I raided a few ROM sites and downloaded pretty much any Pokemon game that's existed pre-Switch. I'm glad that I fetched all the Zelda games because I don't know where else to get them now. But it's just, it's crazy to me. It's like, why are you doing that? There's no reason to do that. Sure, you might have made a game that you wish people never remembered, but it's better to leave it be and have one example of a poorly thought out thing than to go forward with being remembered for being people who preached that they were making things for people to have fun and openly making the decision to not allow anybody to have fun after a certain amount of time. And for some people, it's the only way they're ever going to play those games. Having grown up a broke kid, the only reason I had the consoles that I did growing up was either from getting lucky at like a thrift store or from a lot of saving or because I have an aunt that liked to spoil me. So I was able to get away with doing a lot less, but still always doing some form of work, for getting my hands on the thing. I got lucky with the NES we had. It's why I never owned a Super Nintendo, but I played a few Super Nintendo games. We had friends that had them. But that's why I had Game Boys, and I got lucky with my first couple PlayStations. Those were thrift store items, and I've been able to replace them since I started working. But I wasn't able to buy very many games growing up, so I'd get them for birthdays and Christmas, and occasionally I'd be able to save up and get one. But most kids have allowances, and I really didn't have an allowance most of the time at home. I think the biggest thing I did to try to save up money was to encourage me to read more, which was fine because I was a big fan of reading anyway. My aunt came up with this idea that I'd get paid a penny a page for reading to someone. So I did that with my aunt quite a bit when I went out on the road with her during the summers and stuff. I did that with my mom a little bit, and she did that where she could. I did it with my grandma a little bit, likewise. But I wouldn't have been able to buy all those games. Honestly, I think the biggest times where we bought games, I rented so many GameCube games from Blockbuster and played through them. It's part of the reason why I got really good at speedrunning when I had to, because I knew if I didn't play that game all the way through, I had to return that game, and I wasn't going to be able to get it again for a little bit. There's still there's still save data from rented games on my GameCube memory cards. Um, but yeah, there's so many games that I never would have been able to get my hands on without borrowing or without renting. Uh, because it's not like Blockbuster rented out Super Nintendos. They didn't rent out Super Nintendo games, I don't think at all. But it's not like Blockbuster rented out GameCubes or Xboxes. You already had to have the console. So yeah, I'm strictly of the mind that you should allow people to keep enjoying the stuff that they enjoy. And if you're going to abandon a console, I feel that it should be a legal obligation that if you're creating media entertainment software like that, that you should be legally obligated to make the means by which to uphold and repair the system, as well as, for instance, looking at you, Nintendo, getting rid of the stupid detector for. So, for those of you who don't know, Nintendo has a stupid thing where basically there's a security check when you try to launch a GameCube disc to make sure that it is a Nintendo disc. I think that's bullshit in general, because people should be able to develop, if they want to go to the work of developing a game for themselves on a particular thing, they should be able to do that without having to have some super special piece of equipment and 30,000 hours of legal fees and an argument with Nintendo over it. Like, they should just be able to do it, especially if it's an abandoned console. And all it would really take is, because I'm betting that's all software, unless I'm wrong about it being all software, all it would realistically take to do that is people being able to submit to get mailed a disc that would physically patch the console to say, oh, don't look for this anymore. That's all it would take. I would love, going into this whole game design idea, to go ahead and make a game playable on the GameCube. I'd love it. But I can't. I don't have the means to do that. But yeah, no, I think it's such utter codswallop what they're doing with this. And it's just hurting the fan community at large, especially for Nintendo. People trying to go to their preferred ROM website of choice because they want to play one of the old Pokemon games and they never had a Game Boy. And it's not there because Nintendo DMCA smacked it. Like, what the fuck? There's no reason for that. There's no good reason for that. Unless they release it. That is my caveat. Unless they release it for playability within a reasonable time after they do the takedown. If you're not planning on doing that for 10 years, wait 8 years to do the takedown. Don't do it now and then do it a decade later. Give it time. Because otherwise, by the time your decade has passed, nobody gives a damn anymore. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on that. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed my stuff. If you do, please make sure to slap that like button. Let me know that you did. Don't forget to support the channel on everything you over on Patreon, patreon.com/GTNH. And I will catch you guys later. Don't let's go, show them out. And I'll see you on the scene. Peace!